They say every empire hides a room with no doors, a story told only in whispers because speaking it aloud feels like summoning a curse. Tonight, that door creaks open. This is not the tale of Xerxes the conqueror, the ruler who commanded oceans of soldiers and dared to lash the sea itself. This is the story the torches were lowered for, the truth buried beneath marble halls and golden reliefs, the secret that never reached the royal chronicles. It begins not on a battlefield, but inside a palace where silence was enforced by fear. Xerxes ruled an empire that stretched farther than any man could ride in a lifetime. From the Indus to the Aegean, his word shaped destinies. Servants knelt without being asked. Satraps trembled at the sound of his name. Yet within the palace at Persepolis, beyond the columns carved with obedient nations, lived a girl whose blood tied her closer to the king than any general or priest ever could. She was his daughter, born into silk and gold, raised under ceilings painted with stars, taught from childhood that her life belonged not to herself, but to the empire. In the Persian court, royal children were not raised as children. They were raised as symbols. Every step they took reflected power, every breath they drew was weighed against politics. The daughter of Xerxes learned early how to lower her eyes, how to walk with measured grace, how to listen without speaking. She heard men debate wars as if they were games. She heard priests speak of divine order, of sacrifice, of how the king ruled by the favor of the gods. And she learned the most dangerous lesson of all, that love inside a palace was fragile, and mercy even more so. As Xerxes aged, the weight of rule pressed heavier upon him. Revolts flared like sparks across the empire. Old victories lost their shine. Advisors whispered conflicting counsel, each promising safety while sharpening knives behind smiles. The king grew suspicious, then cruel. He searched constantly for omens, for signs that the gods still favored him. Dreams haunted his sleep, dreams of fire-consuming pillars, of blood-soaking marble floors. The priests told him the gods demanded reassurance. The empire, they said, needed proof that the king's devotion knew no limits. That was when the girl's world began to shrink. At first, it was subtle. Her tutors were dismissed. Her movements restricted. Guards appeared outside chambers that once stood open. She was summoned more frequently to stand silently during rituals she did not understand, watching animals led to slaughter while incense thickened the air. She felt eyes upon her, measuring, calculating. No one explained why. In the Persian belief, royal blood was powerful. It carried the strength of kings and the blessing of heaven. In times of crisis, the most precious offering was not gold or conquest, but blood itself. Ancient customs, rarely spoken of, whispered that when an empire trembled, the gods might demand something terrible in return for stability. These rites were never written down. They lived only in memory, passed from priest to priest like poison. Xerxes listened. The night the decision was made, the palace slept uneasily. Wind hissed through the columns like warning breaths. The king sat alone, staring at a flame that refused to burn steadily. In his mind, he justified everything. He told himself that a ruler must place the empire above all else. That thousands dying in rebellion would be worse than one life lost in devotion. That kings were chosen to make choices no one else could bear. When he summoned his daughter, she came as she always had, calm, composed, trusting in the bond she believed still existed. She bowed before him, unaware that she was standing before a man who had already begun to see her not as a child, but as an answer. He did not shout. He did not rage. His voice was cold, controlled, terrifying in its calm. He spoke of duty. Of legacy. Of the gods' demands. He told her she had been chosen for greatness, for a role no one else was worthy to play. Confusion flickered across her face, then fear. She searched his eyes for the father she remembered, the one who once lifted her so she could see the gardens from above. She found only stone. The preparations were swift and secret. No announcement echoed through the halls. No public ceremony honored her name. Only a handful of priests and guards were permitted to know. The girl was dressed not as a bride, not as a queen, but in white, the color of ritual purity. Her hair was unbound, falling freely down her back, a symbol of surrender. She was told to remain silent. To accept her fate with dignity. As dawn approached, she was led through corridors she had never walked before, deeper into the palace's hidden heart. The air grew colder. Torches cast long, twisting shadows on the walls. Each step echoed like a countdown. She realized then that there would be no rescue, no last-minute mercy. The empire demanded her, and her father had agreed to the price. When the chamber doors closed behind her, sealing her away from the world she knew, history itself seemed to turn its face aside. What happened next would never be carved into stone. No poet would dare speak it. Yet the echo of that choice would linger, unseen, poisoning the roots of Xerxes' reign. Outside, the sun rose over Persepolis, bathing the palace in gold. To the empire, it was just another morning under the rule of a mighty king. But somewhere within those walls, a royal secret was being born, one so dark that even victory could not wash its stain away. The empire did not collapse that day. No thunder split the sky. No god descended in wrath or blessing. Life continued, as it always does after unspeakable acts, and that was perhaps the cruelest part. The sacrifice, carried out in silence, seemed at first to achieve its purpose. Revolts quieted. Advisors praised the king's renewed strength. The priests claimed the gods were satisfied. Xerxes stood before his court once more, crowned and unchallenged, the ruler of the known world. Yet something had changed. Those who looked closely noticed it first in his eyes. The fire that once burned with ambition now flickered unevenly, as if fed by something rotten. He grew restless, unable to sit through councils, pacing like a man hunted by his own thoughts. At night, servants heard him shout in his sleep, calling a name no one else dared to repeat. The chamber where the ritual had taken place was sealed. Orders were given that no one was ever to enter it again. Guards were posted, then quietly removed, as if even their presence acknowledged the truth too strongly. Over time, the corridor leading to it was blocked by tapestries and storage, erased from daily life. The palace learned to forget, or pretend to. But forgetting is not the same as escaping. Xerxes began to rule with harsher judgment. Where once he punished rebellion, now he punished doubt. Minor offenses earned severe consequences. Old allies were dismissed or executed on the faintest suspicion. The court grew tense, laughter rare, trust non-existent. The king demanded loyalty not just in action but in thought, as if he feared that someone, somewhere, could see inside him. The people sensed it too. Though they never knew the cause, rumors spread of a curse upon the royal house. Farmers spoke of strange dreams. Soldiers claimed the king's shadow looked wrong in torchlight. Mothers warned children not to speak his name at night. The empire remained powerful, but its heart felt hollow. Years passed, and history recorded Xerxes as a tyrant undone by excess and pride. Chroniclers wrote of military failures, of revolts that flared once more, of a ruler who lost the favor of gods and men alike. What they did not write was why. They could not trace the rot back to that single decision, to the moment a father chose empire over blood. Those closest to him suffered the most. His remaining children grew distant, watched constantly, trusted never fully. His queen withdrew into silence, her grief unspoken but ever-present. Banquets became hollow displays, grandeur without joy. The palace still gleamed, but it felt like a tomb built for the living. In his final years, Xerxes avoided the inner chambers of Persepolis. He preferred open courtyards, as if afraid of enclosed spaces. Sometimes, at dusk, he would stand alone and stare toward the mountains, his lips moving in silent conversation. Whether he spoke to gods, ghosts, or his own conscience, no one knew. The empire he fought so hard to preserve eventually slipped from his grasp. Power passed to others, as it always does. Statues were erected, then toppled. Names were praised, then cursed. And the darkest secret of his reign remained buried, surviving only as a distortion, a shadow behind the official story. Yet history has a way of leaking through cracks. Centuries later, scholars would puzzle over inconsistencies, over sudden shifts in Xerxes' behavior that could not be explained by politics alone. Legends whispered of a hidden crime, of a royal sin committed in desperation. No proof survived, no inscription confirmed it. Only the echo of a truth too terrible to carve in stone. What King Xerxes did to his daughter did not save his empire. It did not earn him peace. It left him haunted, his rule poisoned from within. The real punishment was not delivered by gods or enemies, but by memory itself, by the knowledge that in trying to secure immortality through power, he had destroyed the one thing no king can rule without, his own humanity. And that is why this remains history's darkest royal secret. Not because it was hidden well, but because those who knew it understood that some truths, once spoken, do not just change how we see the past. They force us to confront how far power can push a human soul, and how easily a crown can turn a father into something history itself would rather forget.